Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder how little kids learn so many words, even when people around them sound different? Well, a new study dives into how babies actually handle different accents. Picture this kid's hearing speech all day long, and it is not just their parents, it's grandparents, strangers, maybe people from different parts of town, or even different countries. How do their brains sort through all that varied sound and still learn what a dog or a ball is? Researchers have noticed that toddlers can actually get used to new accents pretty quickly. A common idea is that they use words they already know as a kind of cheat sheet. So if someone says sack, but you know they mean sock, your brain might figure out that black from this person really means block. It is like a smart guessing game based on what is already familiar. But what if there aren't any familiar words to help out? This is where the researchers in the study got really curious. They wondered if there is another way toddlers might handle accents, something they call a general expansion strategy. Imagine this strategy as just being more open to different ways of speaking when you expect some variety. If you are expecting things to be a bit different, you are more likely to just roll with it. So they wanted to test if simply seeing or hearing different kinds of people could prepare young children to accept accents they haven't heard before. They thought that maybe just experiencing a lot of variety in voices or even in how people look could make kids generally more accepting of new pronunciations, even without direct examples of how an accent changes familiar words. To figure this out, they designed a clever experiment with 24-month-old toddlers who were learning English. They split the kids into two groups. One group, the Indexical exposure group, watched a silent cartoon for about 2 minutes. But here is the twist. While they watched, they heard speech from 4 different native English speakers. These weren't just any speakers. They had voices that were really different from each other, varying in age and sex. The idea was to expose the kids to a lot of vocal variation. The other group, the social exposure group, also watched a short video, but instead of hearing speech, they listened to classical music. In this video, they saw the same 4 people who made the voices for the other group. These people were just gesturing and acting things out, not speaking. So this group experienced a lot of visual variety and social cues, but no accent or speech. The crucial part is that neither of these groups was actually familiarized with the target novel accent they would be tested on later. After this short exposure phase, all the toddlers went through a word learning task. This is where they learned new words, and the catch was that these new words would be spoken in a Spanish accent. They were shown pictures of made-up objects and heard made-up words like tune or theme spoken by a native English speaker during a training phase. Then, in the test phase, they heard the same words, but this time spoken by a Spanish accented speaker. The researchers were watching to see if the toddlers would look at the correct object when they heard the accented word. If the toddlers needed actual examples of how the accent changed familiar words to adapt, then neither the Indexical group nor the social group should have been able to learn the new words in the accented speech. But if that general expansion strategy was at play, meaning that just experiencing variety in voices or appearances made them more open to different pronunciations, then at least one, or maybe both, groups should have succeeded. And guess what? Both groups of toddlers were successful. They were able to recognize the new words even when spoken in the unfamiliar Spanish accent. This is super interesting because it means that it wasn't just about hearing how the accent changed specific words they knew. The researchers ran some statistical tests to be sure. They used something called a repeated measures analysis of variance, a fancy way of saying they compared the kids' looking times. Think of looking time as the p-value or fluke, or meter of toddler studies. If a kid looks longer at the object that matches the word, it means they understood. They found the main effect of trial type, which is good and expected, meaning the kids generally knew what they were doing. But crucially, there was no significant difference or interaction between the two exposure groups. This means that whether toddlers were exposed to varied voices or just varied visual cues, they performed equally well when it came to learning words in the unfamiliar accent. What does this all mean? It means that toddlers don't necessarily need to hear specific examples of how a foreign accent alters familiar words to adapt. Simply experiencing a lot of variability, whether it is in different voices or in how people look, seems to be enough to prepare them to accept those non-standard pronunciations. This general expansion strategy is like a mental preparation. By being exposed to diverse individuals, young children might learn to expect sounds to vary, and therefore they relax their own pronunciation categories. It's like their brains are saying, okay, people sound different and people look different, so it is reasonable to expect that speech will sound different too. This is a less sophisticated but highly effective way of handling the messy reality of language in the real world. It suggests that from a very early age, Children are equipped to communicate with people who speak differently than the default they might hear at home. Now, like any study, there are still some unanswered questions. For instance, we don't know the exact amount or type of variation needed to trigger this general expansion. Previous research has shown that if the voices in the exposure phase are too similar, this strategy doesn't seem to work. So it seems like a certain level of distinctiveness is key. Also, the researchers mentioned that maybe even the music in the social exposure group played a role, or perhaps the gestures themselves were communicative enough signals. Future research will likely explore the precise boundaries of this strategy. Another interesting point is about linguistic expertise. The researchers suggest this general expansion strategy might be available very early in development, even before babies have a strong grasp of words. They even mention a study with 4-month-old infants, showing they benefit from variable talkers when learning sound patterns. This means this flexibility might be a foundational part of how we learn language. So, what's my take on this? I think this study is really cool because it highlights that children aren't just passive recipients of language. They're active learners who have developed sophisticated ways to cope with the complexities of real-world speech. The general expansion strategy is a brilliant concept that explains how they can be so flexible. It's not just about mastering perfectly clear, standardized speech, it's about being ready for the beautiful, diverse messiness of human communication. The implications for this are pretty big. It suggests that exposing children to a variety of voices and people, even in ways that aren't directly teaching them words, can be beneficial for their language development. It might mean that the diverse environments many children grow up in are actually helping them become more adaptable communicators. Future research could really hone in on what specific types of visual and auditory cues are most effective, and how this general strategy interacts with older children's ability to use familiar words. It's a fascinating look into the early building blocks of how we all learn to understand each other, no matter how we sound. What do you think? Does this make sense with your own experiences? Let me know in the comments below. If you found this breakdown helpful, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more insights into the amazing world of psychology. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.